This is the Galaxy S24 Ultra, and I know, I'm pretty late to the party here, but I actually wanted to use this phone for an extended period of time before providing any thoughts on it. And so that's exactly what I've done. And in fact, I've actually been using this phone as my main everyday device for over a month now. I've been using it with my favorite home screen configuration and all of the apps I rely on within any given month. And after all that time, I've come to a pretty resounding conclusion. This phone is very, very similar to last year's S23 Ultra. But obviously, there's way more to it than that. And so 3 months after its initial launch, after a bunch of software updates, and after an extended period of time using it, I'm finally bringing you my full review. You ready? Let's dive in. Okay, in the interest of saving some time, I just wanted to start this review by listing off every way in which this phone is nearly identical to last year's S23 Ultra, which are as follows: the S Pen, the haptics, the fingerprint sensor, and the performance. And I don't care what Samsung or anyone else says about any changes in each of these areas, you will not notice any difference with these 4 aspects between the two phones. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing because each of those aspects were already top tier with last year's S23 Ultra, and despite us being another year on now, they're still top tier compared to pretty much every other phone on the market. And honestly, I don't even really want or need any improvements in terms of the S Pen, the haptics, or the performance, but I will say, after several years now of Samsung using the exact same ultrasonic fingerprint sensor, I was really hoping they'd be a little more bold and place a larger sensor into their Ultra lineup, but alas, that was obviously not to be the case. Surely with next year's phone though, right? Oh, and the fact that we still do not have any sort of fix for the awful face unlock fingerprint scanner disappearing issue that I've complained about in all of my past Samsung reviews is seriously frustrating. I mean, Xiaomi, Nothing, and Google Pixel phones have all addressed this in the past year or two, whereby if you have face unlock set up, the fingerprint sensor icon does not disappear from the lock screen whenever your face is successfully registered, and it makes a world of difference. So Samsung, please address this ASAP so I can actually make use of your face unlock system. But then we turn our attention to the things that Samsung did change with the S24 Ultra. And I'll be upfront, a lot of the changes are incredibly subtle, but despite that, we're still going to talk about them, and what better way to start than with the design. Now, most aspects about the S24 Ultra's design are identical to the S23 Ultra, but there are 2 small tweaks that they made which I really appreciate. The first is that, much like Apple did with the iPhone 15 Pro lineup, Samsung switched to using this matte-coated titanium for the side panels, which is a really nice improvement from the glossy side panels that we had on the S23 Ultra last year, and it honestly does make the phone feel much nicer in the hand. The second small change, which is equally as appreciated by me, is that we finally have evenly sized bezels the entire way around the display. And this was pretty much the only complaint I had regarding the design of last year's S23 Ultra. So to see Samsung finally addressing this made me super, super happy. Now, speaking of the display, on paper, not much has changed. And in terms of the actual display itself, the specs are nearly identical. We do supposedly have a brighter display compared to last year's S23 Ultra. However, in real world use, it seems very, very similar in terms of max brightness when using it outdoors. That being said, what has changed this year is that Samsung has used this really neat anti-reflective coating across the panel, which, as the name implies, helps to greatly reduce reflections. And whilst this is a really cool add-on, I personally only really notice this feature whenever I'm filming the phone, which is when I'm hyper aware of avoiding reflections wherever possible. In real world use, honestly don't even really notice the feature even when using other phones side by side. But that doesn't mean it's not hugely appreciated. I guess I just kind of understand why Samsung didn't overhype it during their launch presentation, instead deciding to keep it on the down low and therefore allowing it to be a really neat surprise to anyone who picked one up themselves. I do also selfishly hope that other manufacturers will follow suit and integrate this feature on their own smartphones going forward, because it just makes filming that much easier, which I know hardly applies to anyone else, but hey, it's the little things that count, right? Real quick, I did want to mention that whilst on paper, the battery in this phone has the exact same capacity as last year's S23 Ultra, I've actually been having ever so slightly worse battery life compared to that phone. Now, don't get me wrong, it is still really impressive battery life, but I guess that brighter display and that higher performing chipset do kind of take their toll, because where I would struggle to get the S23 Ultra's battery to much below 50% after a solid day of medium use, with the S24 Ultra, I'm finding that I'm only ending the day with around 50% left if it's been a day of fairly light use. On days with medium to heavy use, I'm getting through a much larger portion of the phone's battery, even heading under that 20% mark on some days, which I just never really experienced on last year's S23 Ultra. So I don't know whether Samsung still needs to iron out some kinks with efficiency or whatever, but yeah, slight disappointment in the battery department this time around. Alright, now before we press on, just wanted to take a quick moment to thank today's video sponsor, Pulseway. For those who haven't heard of it, Pulseway is the go-to remote monitoring and management solution designed to help you monitor and manage any Windows, Linux, or OS X system. And not only is it available to use on the Galaxy S24 Ultra, but it's also available on essentially every single Android and Apple device as well. And it does so much more than just helping you to manage your system devices. It actually allows you to unlock their peak performance too. So you'll receive real-time actionable alerts that allow you to tackle issues and patch devices on the fly. You can remote into any system and transfer files or run a plethora of automations to auto-remediate issues like clearing unneeded data, taking up valuable storage space, or installing software updates. And because of their state-of-the-art app, you can do all this and more from anywhere and at any time, which I just reckon is so great. And the best part is that you can try it completely for free. So to take control like never before by staying connected and secure, download Pulseway using the first link down in the description below. All right, from there, let's chat about the software on this phone. And this is actually the first Samsung phone that I'm reviewing with the Android 14 update. And we're now up to One UI version 6.1, and man, there is a lot that I love about this software. Now, it is still very similar to past One UI versions, like the settings menu looks nearly identical, and even the quick settings panel looks the same, though we do now have a redesigned expanded quick settings panel, which I kind of like the look of, and at least it's something different, right? But all of the core features are very much the same, and I genuinely think it's about time Samsung mix these aspects up a bit. That being said, what I absolutely adore about Samsung software is the incredible customization flexibility that we have. I mean, the fact that I can have a home screen grid size of 7x7 to place my app icons in this configuration without having to resort to a separate third-party widget app, or the fact that I can customize the look of the recent screen here without sacrificing fluidity, or again, the fact that I can have custom third-party icon packs within the stock launcher itself. That is the sort of stuff that I seriously love. And man, that doesn't even touch the surface of everything that you can do with One UI, which I won't get into in this video, but needless to say, if you're a power user and you love the Android mentality of yesteryear, where you as the user got to decide how you wanted your phone to look and behave, well, then there's really no better option than a Samsung phone. Now, do I need the S24 Ultra to do all of this? No, which is why I can't really consider this to be a selling point of the S24 Ultra itself, but I do want to give credit to Samsung for not locking us into a home screen style that they think we should use. The fact that to this day, we can still have this much control over how the One UI software looks and behaves is seriously amazing. And so finally, we have the cameras. And in all honesty, part of me really wanted to just lump the cameras in with the other similarities that I listed off at the start of this video, because as far as I'm concerned, the cameras on this phone are so similar to those found on last year's phone. In fact, all but one of the cameras are actually exactly the same. But Samsung did make one incredibly controversial change with the camera configuration this year, which is that they swapped out that much loved 10 megapixel 10x periscope lens from the S23 Ultra and replaced it with a 50 megapixel 5x periscope lens instead. And whilst initially I was like, man, I loved that 10x lens from last year's phone and was so sad to hear that they'd gotten rid of it, after using the S24 Ultra for a month, I gotta say, I kinda get it. For example, we still have that 10x button within the camera interface, and across the past month, there have been a significant amount of times where I've tapped it, but have then found that the framing was too tight and have therefore switched to the 5x mode, which has been, by and large, a much more usable field of view. So as a result, I kind of get it. 5x is a much more practical level of zoom, and in all honesty, for shooting images, thanks to software processing, you can still use that 10x mode and get nearly the same level of quality as what the physical 10x lens got us on the S23 Ultra. The area that does take a hit though is when trying to use that 10x mode for shooting videos. There's just no way right now to emulate optical quality when shooting a video like what you can achieve with image processing. So do I wish Samsung just went crazy and gave us an extra 5x lens without removing the 10x lens for those fringe scenarios? Of course, and in some cases, when you're paying this amount for a phone, you kind of think maybe they should have. But acknowledging that space and fitting in that many lenses into a single phone is a serious issue, not easily overcome, I think ultimately I'm okay with the decision that Samsung made to remove the 10x lens and go instead for a better quality 5x lens. And the fact that we can capture incredible images and videos at 1x, 3x, and 5x field of views is seriously killer. I will just quickly note, I think it might be time for Samsung to make some upgrades to the ultra-wide lens though, because there is a noticeable drop-off in quality when shooting with it, particularly during videos. And I also think that sensor cropping trick they use to achieve better quality images at both 2x and 10x magnification should come into play when shooting videos as well, though my guess is that they probably need to use larger sensors for that, which in all honesty, I'm hoping they upgrade next year anyway. So still some improvements to be made, and I still think that the actual shooting experience and quality that you can get with a Xiaomi flagship phone is far better than what we have on the S24 Ultra. So if you're looking for the best camera experience all around on an Android phone, then you might want to look at one of those instead. But as far as versatility goes, no phone can match the camera configuration that we have with the S24 Ultra. Now, with all of that being said, 3 months after this phone's release, do I think it's a device that you should consider getting? Well, if you're coming from an S23 Ultra, then definitely not. This phone is so similar to that phone that you will hardly notice the difference. But for anyone else, man, this phone is incredible. It ain't cheap, but compared to pretty much any other phone on the market, it's the sort of phone that kind of makes its price feel justifiable. And I will say, whilst I don't think it's necessarily the best at anything aside from maybe customization flexibility, it does still rank in at least the top 3 across all phones when it comes to the key pillars most people look for in a premium smartphone. So camera performance, design, the display, battery life, and I'm also going to throw in haptics, which is a key pillar for me. Whilst the S24 Ultra isn't the outright best at any of those categories, it's definitely up there competing with the best. And more importantly, there are absolutely no deal-breaking issues with this phone that might make me a little more hesitant to recommend it. Like, Pixel phones are amazing in almost every category, but have awful customization flexibility and struggle a bit in performance. Nothing phones, they have average cameras and poor haptics. Xiaomi phones, pretty average software and customization flexibility. Like, every major phone right now always seems to have 1 or 2 areas that you gotta be wary of before picking one up. The S24 Ultra, honestly, it has no issues whatsoever, and it's without a doubt the best all-around package that you can buy if price is not an issue. Now, that all being said, I do think that Samsung has been playing it very, very safe for the last few years now and need to think about making some bigger, more tangible upgrades to this lineup of phones, but you can kind of see why they don't feel the need to, because if I'm being completely honest, even after years of trying, no other phone can match the sheer level of quality and features in such a well-rounded package as what is offered by the S24 Ultra.